Hello everyone, good morning, or afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to another Andy West Africa workshop. Today we're going to be focusing on building corporate partnerships during and post-COVID-19. And our facilitators, we have a team from DAI, and they're going to be taking us on this 1.5 hour session. As always, there will be a time for you to ask your questions, but you can always drop them as they come in the chat box, and we'll monitor that to make sure that we try to answer as many as possible within the time. Thank you all for being early. So now that you're here, just a quick exercise before we go into the workshop. I'd like for you to, in the chat box, tell us your name, tell us the organization you're with, and what stage of entrepreneurs you support. So many of the persons joining us today are from intermediary organizations supporting different stages of entrepreneurs. So just your name, your organization, and what stage of entrepreneurs you support. In the chat box, please. Let me look at that so that I can also give you a shout out. So your name, your organization, and what stage of entrepreneurs you support. Thank you. While we also give a few more minutes for persons to join us. Okay, I already see some chats. This is Mami Sawa from Netherlands. Bobola from DAI supports all stages of entrepreneurs. Christina from GIZ, no direct touch with entrepreneurs, but all stages. Pamela from Miller Center for Social Entrepreneur, post-revenue and early growth. Thank you very much. Salman from DAI supporting startups and MSMEs in Tajikistan. And okay, I can't pronounce the other one, but thank you very much for being early. Nike from Teach for Nigeria, supporting the educational ecosystem and social entrepreneurs. Thank you very much. So to manage our time properly, we have a lot to do today. I'm just going to hand over to Zaki, who will take us from here, will introduce himself and the other members of the team who will be facilitating and lead the presentation. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Confidence. Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up here. You guys can hear my voice pretty clearly. It's great to have so many folks on here. We believe this is an important topic. It's one we've been exploring, certainly during COVID and hopefully post-COVID. We're going to see more discussions around topics like this. So thank you, Andy, West Africa chapter, for inviting DAI. The topic today is building corporate partnerships and how can entrepreneurship support organizations explore different ways to partner with corporates. We're defining ESOs broadly. Many organizations here, as Confidence shared, are intermediaries. We may have incubators, accelerators, NGOs that support SMEs and small and growing businesses in a variety of ways, business development service providers, co-working spaces, university incubators, and others, all which we would put under a broader category of ESOs. And we're talking about corporates. We're talking about large multinationals in your countries, as well as large companies that are local from a variety of different sectors that often may not be partnering or engaging with the entrepreneur and innovation ecosystem in many ways, right? So that's what this conversation is really about. And we're trying to build beyond. We're going to talk about financial partnerships and how do we get money from corporates. But we're going to try to build out a broader conversation on what do we even mean by partnerships and the many ways we can foster that relationship during COVID and hopefully lay the groundwork for really strong corporate ESO partnerships post-COVID. So to get started, we're going to briefly introduce ourselves. My name is Zaki Rahim. I see some familiar faces and many organizations that I think DAI has partnered with over the years. I've been working in the entrepreneurship space for almost 20 years, mostly in Africa and Asia. And right now I'm serving as a technical director for a global program with Shell called Livewire. It supports pre-accelerator and accelerator programs in 20 plus countries. And I'll hand over to my colleague Deepika.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deepika Chawla. I'm a manager in the Sustainable Business Group at DAI. I have been focusing on corporate social investment, but with a particular focus on entrepreneurship and innovation programs. And I'm currently the team lead supporting the Kosmos Innovation Center program in Ghana.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Menz. I'm an associate manager for the DAI Sustainable Business Group with Zaki and Deepika. My background is in sustainability and sustainable development, and I've been working very closely with Zaki for the past year and a half on the Shell Livewire Global Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program.
Great, thanks guys. So briefly, introduction to DAI. We are a development organization working around the world with a variety of partners right now in 100 countries or so with 150 plus projects. And we continue to explore partnerships with many organizations like the ones here. We are proud members of ANDI for quite a number of years, working with a number of different ANDI chapters around the world. Briefly, some of the clients, some of the private sector clients, which are the ones we're going to be sharing a little bit of our experience building corporate partnerships with. But many of you all also may know that DAI does quite a bit of work with some of the more traditional bilateral and multilateral donors like DFID FCO and USAID. DAI working across the development spectrum. Economic growth is our largest portfolio, but we also work in a variety of other areas, health, governance, and others. The team that we sit on, Sustainable Business Group, we directly work with corporates in a variety of different areas. And particularly the team that we're on, the Entrepreneurship Enterprise Development Team, we work with corporates that are looking to explore new types of partnerships with the entrepreneur ecosystem. We work with ESOs, like many of you all, on building capacity, training, and support to expand your reach with entrepreneurs and with other partners. And certainly with, we're seeing with DFIs and donors that are looking to build more partnerships within the entrepreneurship space. And finally, we do a fair bit of training. That's also direct training to entrepreneurs, as well as training for accelerators and incubators in a variety of different areas, as well as direct capacity building and accelerator and incubator trainer management support to what we're seeing is a growing demand to run entrepreneurship programs more professionally, building a lot from some of our experiences in more mature ecosystems, and how do we bring that to some of the frontier and emerging markets that we work in. So to get us started, we wanted to start by really thinking through this concept. Why do ESOs and corporates partner? And to do that, we wanted to start by having this be a real conversation with you all. And we wanted to do a quick probing. So the question is, in your experience, what are the biggest challenges for ESOs to form meaningful partnerships with corporates in West Africa? And we're going to actually expand that. We have some colleagues from East and Southern Africa here. We have some colleagues actually from some of our Central Asia entrepreneurship programs as well. So we're broadly going to probe the question, what are some of the biggest challenges when we're trying to partner with corporates? We have a Google Doc here because we like to work with Andy as part of a knowledge management process to capture some ideas, as this is a growing discussion. Please click on the Google link. It should be on the chat box. If Alyssa, you can make that available. And let's take 3 minutes individually, and you can fill in. We have a bunch of sort of post-it notes in the Google Doc. Take 3 minutes and think through how you would respond to this question. If you're having trouble accessing the Google Doc, feel free to put it into the chat function, and we're going to sort of use this as an initial brainstorming session. And certainly ask questions in the chat box if you have, but we'd like everyone to participate because we're all learning about this important type of partnership building together.
We see that the first page is getting a lot of great ideas written down. So if there are no more boxes, feel free to use any of the additional 9 slides that we have to jot down your ideas.
So we're going to give just a minute more, and then we're going to do a brief sort of reflection and share out to get this conversation started a little bit deeper here. So thank you everyone for participating in this first initial brainstorming session. Great. So many of you are already on the Google Doc itself, and we're seeing a lot of great ideas here, right? Many of us want to partner with corporates. We believe there's ways to do it. There may be challenges with donor funding for our entrepreneur support organizations. There may be challenges with government funding. We've seen certainly in some countries there's been an increase, but certainly others during COVID there's been decrease, and we are here because we want to try to explore new partnerships with corporates. Can I get one person to share out something that they put on here that they'd like to bring up to get this conversation started? Is there a brave soul that's put one slide or a few notes that can share? Well, we can share out here a little bit, right? So we're seeing some aspects around internal capacity, right? ESOs may be strong at writing grants, but it's a bit of a different type of partnership when we're trying to understand how to even speak the language of corporates, right? And the capacity internally to be able to do that, right? Developing partnerships beyond CSR. Many of us might be more easily able to access the CSR teams, but we do know that the real commercial alignment and possibly the larger amount of funding and expertise sits within commercial teams of corporates. How do we access them, right? We see this whole idea of finding common ground and alignment with vision, I think, is something we're going to be speaking about a fair bit today as well, right? What does it mean to actually ensure that we understand what the corporates want, but certainly they understand our skills and our expertise as ESOs to actually ensure that the partnership is meaningful? So we would welcome folks to continue to put ideas down on this document. This is one for Andy that we're going to keep collecting, but we're going to jump back now to go through a little bit of the flow. And at the end of this discussion, we are going to have a breakout session for all of you. So we hope you take some notes and put on your thinking caps. We're going to have a fun, creative activity towards the end. Great. Deepika?
Thanks, Zaki. So we're going to get a little bit into now why corporates fund entrepreneurship programs, to try and understand a bit what their objectives are, and then think about in the next section how we can align objectives and the needs of ESOs with that. So if you could just click once, Zaki. Thank you. So corporates fund and implement entrepreneurship programs to pursue broadly two types of objectives, which we'll talk about today. One is development objectives on this slide, and the next slide we'll talk about some of the strategic and commercial objectives. So when we better understand the internal objectives of a corporate, then we can best know how we can add value and pitch what our value proposition is to them. So based on the objectives of the corporate, that is going to affect what a lot of things about the design of their program or the kinds of partners that they're seeking. This can affect what stage of business they're targeting, what sector they focus on. So for example, if a corporate's main priority within their within their development strategy is to create many secure and sustainable jobs as quickly as possible and be able to report that out as a KPI, then that company might not be as interested in targeting very early stage tech companies, which are high risk and prone to be lean. However, on the other hand, if a corporate is looking at stimulating innovation, bringing new products, ideas, and inventions to to a particular sector or to a particular country, then they might want to go for very early stage tech companies. So it's all about understanding where they're coming from. And it could be a situation where you're having a conversation very early on with a corporate and they don't yet know what kind of objective or what theme they want to go under. So knowing these different types of objectives that they might have allows you to kind of shape the conversation and shape it around what value you can offer. Next, please, Zaki. Thank you. So I saw a great comment on, or a great virtual Post-it note on the Google Doc where someone said one of the tensions is, corporates often want large reach and really high numbers for their KPIs, whereas an ESO might be more focused on small reach and deep impact. And I thought that was very insightful because it does come up quite often that corporates are often focused on having large numbers. So then for us as entrepreneurship support organizations and programs, we have to communicate for ourselves what kind of development objectives are we achieving and what kind of outcomes and successes can we communicate about the depth of the impact that is still going to be beneficial for a corporate when they're trying to communicate the value of their investment to their stakeholders. So for example, if we're going in deep with a few entrepreneurs, what is it about their solutions that is adding value to the economy, unlocking efficiencies in supply chains or value chains, and giving access to markets for a wide array of players. So what are the kind of multiplier effects, so to speak, of those investments of time and money that we're making in those few entrepreneurs? The corporate might also be starting from a point where they know the sector or industry that they're in. So you could use that to your advantage and see if there's an alignment there. And most important thing is that you as the entrepreneurship support organization will likely know the market and the ecosystem best. So you have an opportunity to kind of shape the thinking if you can build a relationship with a corporate around how they should target and what kind of impact they can get out of particular objectives and a design of a program. Next slide, please. So now we'll get more into why do corporates fund entrepreneurship programs from a strategic and commercial lens. So corporates are different from donors, right? They have different ways of looking at return on investment. So the first four strategic objectives on the top here should look pretty familiar. We often talk about social investment or CSR programs allowing social license to operate, where the company is looking to build a positive association with their brand and with their company in a particular geographic area. They might be looking outward also to be able to talk about a program that they do in a particular country globally. They might be looking to do stakeholder engagement specifically with youth or with government ministries that are associated with entrepreneurship or youth. Or the economy, and also employee engagement. The ones on the bottom are a bit more forward-looking, and we're seeing industry kind of trend this way, where corporates are looking more about what are kind of strategic or commercial returns on investment that we can have beyond your typical social investment or CSI objectives. So, for example, we see entrepreneurship and innovation programs increasingly tied to supplier development and helping local companies access international supply chains. We see companies wanting to source, use entrepreneurship and innovation programs to kind of get access to market research or intelligence, source new innovations. So, for example, in the energy sector, oil and gas companies that are building out their new energies capabilities, their alternative energies teams, they're looking at startups in the energy space as part of their approach. So we can think more creatively about how we're offering and adding value to that effort. They're also looking at access to R&D, and in some cases, and this is still quite rare, and I think it's just at the beginning, but how can corporates access a financial return through entrepreneurship programs in the developing world through things like equity investments. Okay, so I included just one case study here from the Kosmos Innovation Center program in Ghana that we lead, and it's just a partnership model to kind of frame the conversation that we're having today. So as you can see, there are many different types of partners. There are a few corporate partners, such as Kosmos Energy and Cargill and others, and it just shows how these various partners kind of are all pieces of a puzzle that fit together, and understanding what you can get from a partner, whether that's corporate or otherwise, whether that's financial or in kind or otherwise. So we'll get a little bit more into the details in the following slides. Okay, so now we'll talk. We've talked a bit about the strategy, so now we'll talk a little bit about tactics. This funnel might look familiar to some of you. This is from the buyer's journey framework that we use in our training of startups and SMEs, and we adapt it to use for finding corporate partnerships. So when we look at these three stages, that we put ourselves in the shoes of a company, or multinational corporation or a large national company who might be looking to invest in an entrepreneurship support program. So the first stage that they're at is building their awareness. And during this stage, ESOs will want to kind of make sure they're building their own brand awareness, being present in the right fora, having your name appear in strategic places online, because this is kind of the point where the corporates are doing their own early desk research onto who they might want to partner with or the type of approach they want to take, and you want your name to be associated with entrepreneurship or incubation or startup acceleration in X country when they're doing that research. During the consideration stage, they often do a landscaping study or market assessment, whether that's formal or informal. Often they'll hire someone like us, like DAI, to do this. And if your name comes up as a list of stakeholders that they need to interview, that's a really crucial part of entering, the pipeline of potential partners for corporates. So if there's good engagement with you early on, we've had situations where they even build an approach or a design around one or two organizations that they want to partner with. And if you identify a potential opportunity to partner with a corporate, we advise you not to just wait for them to come to you, which might happen, but also to seek them out or seek out the consultant that they're doing. So thinking about being on the sell side of partnerships, because often you're not going to receive an RFP and an invitation to partner. Lastly, at the decision phase, this is where it shows it's important to kind of build a relationship with the corporate throughout the process. They're going to have a list of partners that they want to partner with if they haven't decided yet, and then be making a decision on how they want to move forward. And the last slide in this section, so We'll get more into the value proposition in the preceding sections, but this is just a few examples of how you can start to structure, what is it that you are offering from your side? How are you adding value to a corporate and helping them achieve those objectives that we talked about on the previous slide? Some of those include access to a pipeline of entrepreneurs, rather than having to build their own program and hire, their own staff. You have the resources, you have existing models and frameworks for your organization and for your program. You have networks into finance institutions, potentially other investors, potentially investors in government, and then co-investment, meaning if you are already getting funding oh, sorry, I think someone's unmuted. But if you're getting co-investment from other funders, that is a good way to show corporate how you're leveraging their funding and kind of being able to bring other co-investors to have sort of amplify the effect and reach of the program. And there's many others here, and I'm sure that many of those can think of others. So if there's others that people can think of, please put it in the chat so we can keep the discussion going. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague. I believe Alyssa's next.
Thank you, Deepika. So Deepika just walked us through the why. Why do corporates and ESOs want to partner? And now we're going to dive into the how. So how can ESOs and corporates partner? And that's especially relevant within the current context with COVID-19. And we're going to start off by talking about the non-financial support. So as we know, within the current macroeconomic conditions, a lot of budgets are very tight right now. So these are some quick wins and kind of foundational relationship builders that you can take in order to be able to connect with corporates and then move on to a second stage where there might be some sort of financial support. And that latter financial support, we've broken down into core ESO program funding, as well as more consulting and fee-based services. So that way you can think through a few additional creative ways that you might be able to have a financial relationship with a corporate. Next slide, please. So to start off with the non-financial support, and of course we know this is incredibly important right now, and we will start off by talking about mentorship and coaching. So mentorship and coaching, as we know, is one of the most integral parts of a startup successfully being able to create a business and then stay in business. So we usually distinguish between mentorship and coaching just by the amount of time and or the type of relationship. So mentorship might be more one-on-one that's holistic over a longer period of time, whereas coaching might be specific to one technical area. And we have a few examples for you of different types of mentorship that you can think through with corporates that just depend on the corporate individual's time that she or he can commit to working with you and your entrepreneurs. So first and foremost, you as an ESO can really benefit from expanding and professionalizing your network, having corporate mentors, because those corporate mentors could actually attract a stronger applicant pool and really increase engagement and excitement within the community in order to participate in your program. And we also know from the corporate side that many corporates have actual volunteering requirements. So this might be a really fun way that you can get corporate individuals to not just meet their volunteering requirement, but really work through making a true impact within their community, because we know that that also is one of the biggest motivators for individuals to serve as mentors. And during COVID-19, although of course it is a little challenging to switch to this virtual environment, we've found that that can actually make it easier for corporate individuals to be able to volunteer as mentors or coaches, because they no longer have to physically take the time to travel to that location. And so it's much easier for them to fit that into their daily schedule. And then lastly, the best mentor relationships eventually become two-way. So mentorship and coaching is a phenomenal way for you to be able to very slowly get the corporation to start learning more about your ESO and learning about the incredible entrepreneurs that are working with you. So that way you can start building a stronger foundation and identify other forms of connections that you can create. Then another non-financial form of support is guest speakers. And this is a way to even reduce the time commitment more so, because a guest speaker might only speak for one hour session or for just a few sessions over a week. And this is a fantastic way for you to help your entrepreneurs understand some of the procurement as well as management requirements of corporations, because we did get in the first exercise, someone write down that there are different types of languages, processes, and understandings between ESOs and corporates. And so many corporates have very rigorous procurement requirements and even processes for suppliers to be able to register to bid on projects. So this is one fantastic way for you to be able to help your entrepreneurs work through and untangle some of these roadblocks that can impede them from working with different corporations. And then lastly, it offers an opportunity for the corporate team to learn more about your ESO with even less of the time commitment required. Another very fun way that has been emerging for corporates to support is by serving as a judge during a pitch event. So some ESOs use a pitch event as a way to have a culmination for their participants who have gone through the program, or even just to show alumni and showcase what their service offerings are. And so by having the corporates serve as a judge, it can be a great way for them to find innovative ideas for potential suppliers that they might actually want to integrate within their supply chain. It's also really positive PR for the corporation because they can show and announce that they are being very active within the local communities. And also it's a great way for that corporation to be able to connect with other entities working within their industry by meeting other judges or even investors that just come or participate within this pitch event. And then on the other hand, for you as an ESO, this offers a great amount of credibility and can actually serve to attract additional investors or corporates that are really excited because they see, okay, this huge industry player is serving on this pitch board as a judge. So this means that this is really important and we want to go. There are a lot of opportunities here for us to be able to capitalize on. Another opportunity that's related is by inviting corporates to buyer days or demo days. And so these are just essentially opportunities, of course, for you to showcase your entrepreneurs and your graduates. And these are ways for your entrepreneurs to be able to interact with greater members of the industry so they can really increase their networks. And equally, as we know, many corporates are trying to strengthen their local supply chains. So this is a fantastic way for them to meet new innovators that then they can use as suppliers in the future. And additionally, amidst COVID-19, again, similar to the pitch events and mentoring, it can actually be even easier for these corporations to be able to attend the events. And we've listed in the bottom a few different platforms right now that other ESOs have been using to launch buyer days and demo days. So for example, Run the World does everything from registration to managing financing to individual videos and one-on-one chat breakout sessions for a corporate and an entrepreneur to be able to have a quick discussion about the service offerings. So these are some really creative ways that you can still make an impact for a low cost amidst the pandemic. And then lastly, perks have been emerging as a great supplement or complement to cash prizes related to pitch events, demo days, or even just graduation from participation within an entrepreneurship training program. And we actually wanted to open this up to, in the chat box, please write down any types of perks that immediately come to mind. And these could be anywhere from, for example, website or email hosting. It could be financial assistance or HR consulting to really help your entrepreneurs think through what are the mechanics of creating a strong structure that can really be sustainable and durable for my business. And feel free to continue writing down some ideas in the chat as we move on to the next section.
Thanks, Alyssa. So now we'll get into the types of funding that you might be able to source to support your core program. So we know that most times and many times entrepreneurship support organizations operate off of a lean staffing strategy. So it's really important to prioritize your resources, your human capital, your human resource for what you're going to go after. I think we're trying to make it clear that this takes a lot of time and investment. You know, building a corporate partnership requires an investment on the side of the ESO as they try to build relationships. And so knowing what to prioritize and what you want to invest in is very critical. So what we've put here is sort of examples of different types of revenue generating activities that an ESO can engage in, and kind of broadly, where do they sit on the difficulty and risk to implement scale. And so we separate out here a few different areas, and in the next slides, we'll go through just a few, select one of these in more depth. But you see here, sponsorships are on kind of the relatively low lift. You know, once you have a sponsorship, generally you're exchanging financial support for branding. So there aren't a huge amounts of reporting requirements or needing to write, you know, grant applications or things like that. So that's what makes it kind of on the relatively low risk sale. On the other side of the scale, you know, you have grants which kind of span, you know, they kind of can range from medium to moderately high difficulty and risk to implement and time intensivity, depending on what organization is giving the grant, whether it's a corporate foundation or a donor. You know, what the requirements are to both apply for that grant and be awarded, and also report on it going forward. And then the other kind of activities on the spectrum. And not all of these are necessarily corporate partnerships related, but we kind of wanted to map out and show where all the different revenue generating activities could sit on this particular spectrum. So to get a little bit more into sponsorships, we found this to be a great entry point for building corporate partnerships. Again, sponsorships often exchange co-branding opportunities with low or no strings attached program funding for ESOs. This could be a great way for you to leverage pieces of your program that have high visibility in exchange for branding. And then you could use that piece to either subsidize the cost or cover the cost of that particular event, or you can use it to subsidize other parts of the program, because usually sponsorships aren't tied, the money isn't tied to any specific line item or program that you need to spend it on. So for example, if you're hosting a pitch event or a hackathon or something like this, or you know, you can use that to get a sponsorship. Often, you know, major ESO sponsors will be able to support ESO operational budgets of an entrepreneurship program from a social investment point of view. So they might be able to put their branding or logo. They might want to do that, you know, on your physical space, in your incubator, or on your website. They might want to support a specific cohort. So we've seen sometimes with companies that they, you know, have a particular sector that they're in, for example, telecommunications, and they say, okay, we want to support a one-year cohort or a once-a-year cohort, hopefully, of telecommunications startups that are in the field. And so they might say, okay, we want to set aside a certain part of your incubator, or we want to do a particular training curriculum specifically for these, and potentially even bring them into the supply chain. The short-term sponsorships is the one I was mentioning in the beginning. So the kind of one-off events, hackathons, investor days, etc. And this can be a great way to get your foot in the door and start building a relationship with a corporate, starting from here and building up. Next slide. Another way that corporates may want to contribute to your program is through seed capital. So, often, corporations like to show that they've been investing in businesses, investing in local businesses and local entrepreneurs. And this can take the form of grants, equity investment, or debt. We've seen corporates put money into revolving funds in partnership with a local financial institution, and be able to support an annual cohort of businesses that way. Most often we see it taking the form of grants, but this is just another way that you can have, you can enhance the offering to entrepreneurs of your program through a corporate partnership. And finally, space rentals. So we've seen, this model get built out more as certain entrepreneur hubs, incubators, accelerators are kind of also co-working spaces for their entrepreneurs. We've seen how, sometimes hubs will set aside a specific floor or room or section of their co-working space and have it be kind of a branded co-working space that a corporate is using for a particular team, generally a more innovative team or a team that wants to be connected with the entrepreneurship community. And you can sell that as a service offering or a space rental offering to your corporate partners. And that gives a way for you to continue to be in close proximity, build a relationship, and build up to hopefully a bigger partnership and source of funding there. You could also rent out your space for kind of one-off corporate events. And again, this is all just a means of both bringing in some revenue, but starting small and building up to a larger partnership with them. Over to you, Saki.
Thanks, Deepika. So the third section, we've talked about ways to approach a corporate for a partnership that we're not asking directly for funding, financial. So we're talking about some non-financial support. Certainly the different ways that Deepika framed financial support or core funding for ESOs. And we're going to move here to ways in which you as an ESO can look at your strengths and possibly frame some of your service offerings as consulting services for corporates. The first that we're seeing is corporate ESOs that have some great trainers and research staff and are training entrepreneurs in certain industries, have an expertise that they can offer certain corporates in terms of research. So that might look like market studies, industry briefs, technology trends, pre-feasibility studies, or very specific ecosystem mapping, and various ways in which then it's a paid service that you can offer because you're bringing something very specific as an ESO and the types of relationships and intel that a corporate may need and simply doesn't have access to. Secondly, support with value chain development. This we're seeing ways in which an ESO that has the capacity to bring small and growing businesses together and already do training in a certain way that may often be coming from a donor or government. Can we approach a corporate in a different way and show that we can complement what type of value chain development support they need? For example, here we have a supermarket that may be wanting to buy more local products. Or the example here is another ESO that we've worked with. It's a poultry company that's been importing its maize for many years and is willing to buy local maize, but needs a stronger local value chain to be developed. And thinking through an ESO's expertise, we list here a few of those that we may be able to show can be sold as training and consulting services for these corporates in value chain development, training farmer cooperatives on business management, supporting local agro-processors with the packaging and logistics, managing a revolving fund focused on traceability and being able to show that we can help with some of the management side, offering a buy local certification so that those corporates that are wanting to buy local can show that that it's valid in the market, and they can use that also as a branding exercise. When we build on that to some of the other sectors that we work in, here we have examples of oil and gas sector, the mining sector. We know that the local content space is growing. This is the demand by governments to have corporates, multinationals, and local corporates reporting on how many of their suppliers are local, how much of their workforce is local, and the whole local content space is growing quite a lot. We certainly know that much of it was the history around this was written in Nigeria and other parts of West Africa, and there's a lot of research going into how can ESOs play a unique role to help some of these types of corporates meet their local content standards by building on the local supplier development teams. So what does that mean? You're going to the corporate and saying maybe some of the ways in which you already have strong trainers in your program and can bring on experts. Maybe you could offer training for health and safety of SMEs. Pitch training to prep for some of the supplier forums that these corporates are going to have. Supporting with some of the training on supply chain management, financial management, HR, ISO compliance, and other types of trainings where you're saying to the corporate, because you are a training provider, you can do this efficiently and bring some of the right SMEs to the table that the corporates may need, and then they are paying you for those services. Another one, a popular one that we're seeing also growing in this space, and several Andy members have been also supporting this around the world, is the idea of reverse pitches. Sometimes it's framed within what's called an innovation challenge, but basically the framing is that many times the entrepreneurs that graduate from ESOs think they have a product or service that they can sell to a corporate. And through various networks, they may try to pitch their idea to a corporate, but the problem is they don't really understand the complexity of that industry. The flip side is we know that corporates need to find new ways to innovate, bring innovation into their supply chain, how they're doing product development, how they're doing supply chain management, how they're paying suppliers, and the whole growth of the fintech space, but they may not know how to partner. So the idea of a reverse pitch is they partner with an ESO and they come with some of the clear problem statements in their industry, and then they're putting that out there to entrepreneurs in your programs that can then build products and services in this space. And then they receive mentorship and through the corporates, and then there's clear guidance to possibly have those innovative ideas be bought by the corporates. An example here, I think many of you all know Impact Hub. They partnered with a government accelerator to run an agribusiness reverse pitch. They brought together 10 agribusiness companies that all were facing challenges around plastic waste, and the ESO itself structured a reverse pitch to source innovative ideas from a variety of entrepreneurs that helped all 10 of those agribusinesses find new ways to address the plastic waste issue in their supply chain. And finally, another way in which we're seeing ESOs partner with corporates is being brought in to run trainings for various teams within the corporate. So it might be the R&D team, the innovation team, marketing team. If your ESO is already training entrepreneurs in skills such as design thinking, market research, all of these innovative ways in which to get entrepreneurs to have a more entrepreneurial mindset, corporates are seeking this type of support as well. And we're seeing ESOs selling those same training services to corporates. And finally, one which was in a way rather unique, it's an ESO that we work with where a corporate approached them during COVID that had to make quite a significant amount of layoffs. And as part of the transition program for the employees that were getting laid off, they asked the ESO to train their staff on entrepreneurship skills as a way to become more marketable as they were getting let go. Some complex relationships here, but certainly we're trying to frame a broader discussion around the ways in which ESOs think through their strengths. What can you offer a corporate that maybe they hadn't thought that they could really benefit if you have a clear value proposition for them?
We will now spend the next 10 minutes just running through a few tips to build more and better corporate partnerships. And just as we're going through these sections, which we've grouped into 3 main key challenges, feel free to add any additional tips that come to mind right in the chat function, and we can discuss those at the end. So the first theme that we'll address is the challenge of bridging different worlds. So corporations and ESOs generally have very different missions, even visions for what their future might look like. They also could have very different internal structure, and they speak different languages. So both corporates and ESOs tend to use a fair amount of jargon, and you might not understand what some of the corporate needs, designs, and drivers really are, such as external regulatory factors, as well as even internal pressures that they have, because corporations typically have many different business units that might have competing interests. But on the flip side, the corporations might not truly understand what entrepreneurship is. They might be intimidated by the phrase entrepreneurship and innovation. So these are some challenges that can really impede successful partnerships. And additionally, corporations and ESOs can work on very different timeframes. So it's just very important to understand whether the process might be slower or faster, and how you can really accelerate if there are hiccups along that partnership path. And some tips for bridging these different worlds are, first, to treat the corporate partnership as a business development process and really investing in building relationships and trust. And this takes a lot of time. So it's really beholden on you to conduct market studies to understand what that industry looks like, even signing up for industry news and media notifications. That way you can know, okay, what's going on in this political climate, or what external pressures are influencing this corporate's decision making, and where are the gaps that we as the ESO can come and fill. And then building really strong channels of communication. So this is by finding champions within the company, and usually within different business units, who can really advocate you and understand your service offerings. And that involves going to industry events, going to buyer days, demo days, and really trying to embrace and interact with this corporate in multiple environments. And then lastly, to think through your appreciation strategy. So for example, with some of the how that we discussed earlier, such as mentorship or even pitch events, by hosting appreciation dinners or sending little packages for a judge. So that way the corporate really understands that this is not a one-way relationship, but is mutual.
So the next group of challenges and tips we have is about articulating a value proposition. And you might see this chart as something quite familiar in your use of coaching and training entrepreneurs. And we would encourage you to kind of turn that inward and look at how can you articulate and use some of those same tools to use a unique value proposition in the context of building corporate partnerships and what they as the quote unquote customer are looking for. So some of the challenges is sometimes ESOs can be focused on what they need and what funding they need or support they need, instead of thinking, how am I adding value to this corporate partner? And so a little bit of a shift in thinking can help you in better articulating why a corporate should partner with you. So some tips for articulating a value proposition, tailoring your pitch to the corporate specific needs. Now, this doesn't mean going so far outside of your own core strengths. As an ESO, your strength is that you have a mission, that you know what your assets are, you know what role and position that you play in the ecosystem. So staying true and authentic to that, but finding the pieces of that story that are going to be most appealing to a corporate based on that research you did, based on the conversations that you had, and really highlighting those and bringing those to the fore in your conversations. So for example, you might want to emphasize your social impacts beyond just how many jobs that are created or how much did revenues increase when due to the program that the entrepreneurs were engaged in. These are numbers that companies are going to be very interested in. But a differentiator can be, is the corporate that you're interested in have a theme around environmental sustainability? Do they have a specific focus on supporting women entrepreneurs? Do they have a focus on a particular, on supporting rural communities? So think about what are kind of the social impacts that your businesses have, which they might not even think about articulating because it's just part of doing business, but you as the ESO can help them think through that. So for example, if you have small businesses or startups that you're working in the agricultural sector, are they working with organic inputs, or or are they reducing waste or increasing efficiency with water use to help their own bottom line? That's a social impact story and environmental sustainability story that you could tell a corporate, and they could also put that theme around their investment should they decide to invest in your program. On conducting background research to understand the corporate's competitors, particularly in your market, and understanding how the program you're offering them can help differentiate them and their brand in your country. And finally, think about alternative revenue streams. So how, and this is just going back to some of the pieces that Zaki was presenting earlier, think about how your offerings to entrepreneurs can be sold as consulting services to corporates and how it can add value there. Finally, bringing on other partners. So in some cases, it might be strategic to kind of partner up or join forces with another complementary entrepreneurship support organization in your ecosystem, potentially with a financial institution that you're already partnering with and working with, or with government. I think for corporates, they're trying to network into the local ecosystem, and that's what you can unlock for them. And you can also strengthen and broaden your offering to the corporate so that they feel like they're getting more bang for their buck, so to speak. So definitely strategically thinking about how you're partnering is a key part of this.
Great, and the last section of how we're framing the different tips is around sustainability, right? So we know that ESOs, we need sustained funding for operations, and the flip side is corporates may want to offer short-term sponsorship, or they may want to come in, sponsor a pitch event and say that they're awarding some funding to a couple of your best entrepreneurs, but that's not necessarily going to help with the core funding that you need, right? And then the flip side as well is that corporates often see or may see an entrepreneurship program as a PR exercise. And so there's different ways in which that's messaged, and also the different ways in which you approach different types of staff within the corporate to have a real discussion around the benefits that we've sort of outlined here when you're coming with a type of value proposition. And so the tips, I think one is this idea of starting small. And we've hopefully outlined a little bit that, yes, ideally full funding to fund your entire ESO from a corporate would be great. A large multi-year check would be fantastic. But we are trying to show that there are many ways to build partnerships with corporates, like engaging them as mentors and getting them excited about mentoring entrepreneurs, and getting excited about your ESO might be something that then starts to grow into a bigger relationship. And then it's as you're building these relationships, you're hopefully helping that corporate see the value of investing in entrepreneurship in the longer term. And so we actually have a small activity. I'm happy. We're actually sort of, we're doing well on time. Joshua, I think you'll be happy that we're sort of pretty good on time here. We wanted to pause for a minute before we do a small breakout session and actually take a few questions because we hopefully put a few ideas. We saw a few of you guys taking notes. So we wanted to pause for a couple minutes and ask, are there some questions at this point?
Feel free to drop your question in the chat, or just go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to just ask.
And the Andy team, you know many of the members on this call. If there's a question based on how we framed this, we would welcome you guys asking. If you think there's something we've not covered clearly, we're trying to make this as practical as possible for you guys to start to have a new type of conversation with corporates in your community.
Thanks, Zaki. I can probably maybe just get this started. This is Olatunji, the West Africa manager for Andy. My question goes around cost support that you just talked about. A lot of the time when corporates just want to directly fund the entrepreneur or fund the beneficiaries, how do you kind of let them see the need for cost support to keep your operations going? And then this second one is some of them kind of usually maybe cap it and say, we don't want to fund more than 10% of the budget as your administrative or cost support. How do you kind of get them to support, to put more into crowdfunding to keep your operations on as an ESO?
It's a great question. I think I can take a first stab at it. I'd welcome, I think, Deepika, you've been juggling this particular question right now with one of our programs. As a start, if it's a grant, which might be the easiest way that a corporate wants to sponsor, to say we gave a small grant to 3 of entrepreneurs in an ESO, you should be able to at least negotiate to have a fee that you can charge to manage that grant. As we know, both donors and governments, if organizations are managing grants for them, the fee might be at least 7 to 10% to at least manage it. And that starts to frame a little bit of ways to have them understand that this isn't free to be able to administer. And I wonder, Deepika, if there's something that comes to mind to build on that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first thing that came to my mind. You know, when you talk about having a fund or a particular prize that might even be branded for a particular corporate, often we see that you know there can be an administrative fee that you charge to manage that. So that would be my first point to agree with Zaki. I think really, you know, this is an issue about this 10%. Kind of going to overhead and administrative costs. I think this is sort of something that corporates have learned from, you know, foundations and other donors. It's all about building the relationship. So, you know, you can start off there with 10%, but then as you build the relationship with the particular individual, you know, it's really about turning the people that you interact with at the corporate into advocates for your program, making them really feel like they're part of your team, and aligning their interests. So and showing them, you know, everything that goes into running your organization beyond just the programs. You know, you need to keep the lights on, you need to pay for the space, you need to do all these sorts of things. And then they start to kind of get a bit more personally invested, and it's just like any other kind of customer relationship where you're trying to build that to a point where they're willing to invest more and more, and advocate internally to have a more robust partnership with you. So again, we know that this is an issue that's felt across many different ESOs, and when we've seen it be successful, it's really about bringing them in and making them feel like they're part of the team. And this could sometimes the trade-off here is relinquishing or, you know, giving them more of a seat at the table in some sort of pieces of how you're running the organization or how you're designing programs. They might want to have a bit more say if they're going to be supporting that. So thinking about that partnership differently, instead of just, you know, receiving money from them, it's about really truly bringing them on as a partner. That can also foster more funding for overhead and such.
And I think we're seeing this idea of a corporate accelerator versus a corporate funded accelerator, where a corporate funded accelerator may be doing the branding and their sponsorship, and a corporate accelerator is they're bringing in the expertise of an ESO to rethink how they do R&D and supply chain management writ large. And in a number of more mature ecosystems, let's say in Europe, for example, this has been around for at least the last 5-10 years, and there's a growing trend in that. But during the prep for post-COVID, the demand for new ideas as supply chains get disrupted, this is, you all as ESOs are sitting on valuable resources for innovation. And so part of that is having a different type of discussion that can be done low cost in a virtual environment, because you all have also gotten stronger expertise in how to run these programs more efficiently during COVID anyway. So really powerful question, a lot of different pieces to that. I want to pause, and we're going to come back to questions, but I want to make sure we get through this brief activity, and I'm going to introduce it here, and we hope everyone's going to have active participation in this Zoom world we're in. We're going to break you out into small groups in just a few minutes with the help of Confidence. But basically here, this is the activity. So in your small groups, you're going to be broken up into groups of about 6 to 8 people. And you are an ESO in West Africa, okay? You've been running an entrepreneurship training program for the past 5 years. You run various types of cohorts with, they're about 3-month training programs with 15 to 25 small and growing businesses per cohort. You're also running pitch events where you're bringing a variety of funders to the table for some of your best entrepreneurs to access funding. Your program has been sector agnostic, working with entrepreneurs from various sectors, but you've been considering running sector-specific or industry-specific trainings where you're bringing in entrepreneurs from a certain sector as a cohort and run targeted trainings in that way. And for now, your ESO has mostly been funded by a donor or local government grants. So here's the activity we are proposing. Here we go. Your ESO is seeking to build corporate partnerships, all what we've been talking about, right? In your small group, choose one of the 4 corporates here on the right-hand side and brainstorm a strategy and pitch how you would build that partnership. Frame your value proposition clearly. Hopefully some of the tips and ideas from non-financial, financial, and consulting and fee-for-service value propositions, maybe ways you're being creative. We want you to think outside the box here, and we're trying to foster a number of new ideas. We ask one of you in the group to be a scribe to just take simple, quick notes on what you guys brainstorm. And then we're going to ask each group to give a 1-minute quick pitch where us from DAI and our colleagues from Andy, we're going to serve as those that are from the corporate listening to you as an ESO trying to pitch why we should consider partnering with you.
Saki, I would just add in here, this is obviously a hypothetical pitch situation, so have fun with it. If you want to add on additional details to what your ESO is, if you want to give it a fun, creative name or a particular program, feel free to do that. The point of this is to have a little bit of fun and apply the learnings.
Great. Alyssa's going to put the directions into the chat once you guys are in the group. As well as a reminder, maybe for some of those who haven't worked with corporates or are not based in West Africa, Olam is one of the larger agribusinesses in both West and East Africa, sourcing from thousands of farmers, and they do a lot on value addition and processing. Barclays, of course, a major bank, Chevron, major oil and gas company, and MTN, one of the largest telecoms in the region. So, Confidence, looking at 40 plus people, can we break into, shall we say, 6 groups?